If you have Xcode projects created prior to Arc, including many of the exercise projects for this course, they'll continue to work correctly. You can open them up in Xcode and they'll work just fine. Xcode will not force you to migrate anything to Arc, but it might be a good idea to. So I'm opening an older project here that was created prior to Arc's existence. It's from the archiving chapter earlier in the course. Even from just taking a quick look at it, I can see there's some things that need changing. We're working with the NS Auto Release Pool object. That shouldn't be used with Arc. We've got calls to release, pull, drain, and so on. If I looked further into the actual objects here, I've got the dealloc method with a call to super dealloc. I know that that kind of thing's not allowed in Arc, but even so, I can actually go ahead and build this. It should build successfully because we don't have to use Arc, so projects open beforehand will work just fine. Now, when I open an older project, it's worthwhile looking on the toolbar here. I can see that I've got one warning popping up here that right now says validate project settings. We should work with these first. So if you're getting any complaints, deal with those first. It's suggesting that I upgrade the debugger from GDB, the older one, to LLDB. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and perform those changes. It's asking if I want to take snapshots before cleaning up this project. For my purposes, no, I don't. So I've dealt with that. We have no issues. I've done nothing yet about converting to Arc. Now, we've seen earlier that Arc is something the compiler does. So one question might be, how do I know? How do I know if Arc is on or off for a particular project? Well, one clue might be just looking at your code and seeing if you have things like NS Auto Release Pool being used. That's not Arc compatible, so this is telling me that this project isn't Arc. But if I want to formally look, what I need to do is look at the project settings for this project. How I do that is by clicking the very top icon in the project navigator here, the one with the project name, in this case, archiving. So selecting that icon, we have settings that we can read over here. We've got settings for both the project and what's called the target. If I select the project settings, we find a section called build settings. Now there's an awful lot of stuff that goes on here, most of which you'll never need to touch. But the setting of whether automatic reference counting is turned off or on is actually buried in here. The easy way to find it is using this box. I can search on automatic. There we go. As I'm starting to type it, I'll see there's an option under the Apple LLVM compiler, what Xcode is using behind the scenes to compile a project, and it says Objective-C automatic reference counting, no. Now, you might be tempted to just change this to yes. That would be the wrong way to go about it because it would be incompatible. Xcode can help us migrate this project to automatic reference counting. I don't want to just flick this option to yes because there's all sorts of things going on that are incompatible with Arc. So to properly convert a project to Arc, I'm going to go to the menu option under Edit in Xcode, come down to the Refactor section where I'll find Convert to Objective-C Arc. Click that. Going to ask what target you want to convert. I only have one here, a typical project with a single target, meaning what will we actually compile this into? It's just one program. I'll click check. It'll step us through a couple of different screens about converting to automatic reference counting. Click next on this panel. And what it's going to do is now give us a preview, give us a comparison of the things that it's changed between our project as it was before and what it's doing afterwards. What we're actually seeing is the before is on the right-hand side and the after is on the left-hand side. So by scanning it, I can see that in the employee header file, it's changing the retain property to a strong property. If I jump into the implementation file, I can see that there's a couple of calls to retain that are being removed because those aren't necessary anymore. Arc will take care of figuring out when an object needs to be retained. Not only that, but I can see the dealloc method in the original one has been completely removed in the converted one because it's just not needed anymore. If I jump into main.m and take a look at the changes there, I can see that the NS Auto Release Pool on line 6 has been changed to an @auto release pool block. If I come down a little further, see what else is going on, we've got a call to release, doesn't need to be done anymore, and the drain of the pool has been replaced just with the closing brace of the @auto release. That all looks good. I click save. I jump over into my main where I can see that I got some simpler code going on now. But if I go ahead and click build, build succeeded. We've now successfully converted this project into Arc. Now, for additional information, take a look at the developer.apple.com website. And what you'll find is in the Mac OS X developer library, there is a document on transitioning to Arc. Sometimes it's a little difficult to find, but you'll find it in the release notes section, or you can search for it. Transitioning to Arc release notes will actually go into detail about some of the things you should be aware of when converting older, more legacy style projects with a lot of code. So this contains more information on the technical details if you need it, and the common issues when migrating projects. Most of these things we've actually talked about. There are a few more unusual things that Arc will choke on, like if you've defined your own custom retain and release methods, these aren't allowed. So there are suggestions in that document for what you might do instead, and it's certainly a worthwhile document to have on hand the first couple of times you migrate a larger project to Arc.